The claim I'm responding to is tenure is the cause of underperforming teachers. The speaker had three supporting claims for this. The first supporting claim was that the teacher evaluation period leading to tenure is inadequate. The second claim was that due to tenure, teachers have a highly secure job and therefore have no motivation to maintain educational standards. The third claim is that tenure benefits the job security of teachers but hurts student learning. Returning to supporting point one, the teacher evaluation period leading to tenure is inadequate. This claim is irrelevant because it only addresses the evaluation period leading to tenure, not tenure itself. At issue is tenure, and that is what happens after tenure, what happens after a teacher is granted tenure, not what happens before. The main claim is tenure is the cause of underperforming teachers. Therefore, the question implied is how does tenure affect the performance of teachers? Discussing the evaluation before their tenure does not relate to the main claim. The second main claim that the speaker has is due to tenure, teachers have highly secure jobs and therefore have no motivation to maintain educational standards. He provides evidence for this claim in that the process to try and fire a teacher is highly expensive and highly time-consuming, and most administrators don't even pursue it for those reasons. That does substantiate part of the claim, which is that they have highly secure jobs. The other part of the argument, which is that they have no motivation to maintain educational standards, is not supported by the evidence. All the evidence states is that it's an extremely difficult and time-consuming process to try and fire a teacher. As to how tenure itself relates to or promotes the underperformance of teachers, there is no evidence in that claim. Therefore, it is not sufficient. The speaker's secondary claim, 3, is that tenure benefits the job security of teachers but hurts student learning. There are two pieces of evidence cited, one of which is a quote, which states, "Tenure is the holy grail of teachers' unions, but it has no educational value for kids. It only benefits adults." Now, this quote says nothing about tenure being detrimental to the education of students. It only says that it benefits teachers, and no one can argue with that. No one can argue with it only benefits teachers and has no benefit for education or the students. But there's nothing to substantiate the claim that somehow tenure has a trickle-down effect from underperforming teachers to underperforming students. The second claim, the second piece of evidence cited is that the speaker used himself as an example as a student who felt underprepared for college because of previous substandard teachers. Okay, I can't speak to his experience, but he provided no evidence that tenure was the direct cause of these allegedly substandard teachers. So hence, tenure can't be cited as, there's no sufficient evidence linking tenure to the cause of, the underperformance of teachers. So to sum up, the claim that the evaluation period leading to tenure is inadequate is irrelevant. The claim that the job security of teachers is somehow a cause to the indifference or the lack of motivation to maintain educational standards is not sufficient, and neither is the claim that job security hurts students. That is not sufficient either, or at least the evidence is not sufficient. Thank you.
All right, structurally, everything is pretty easy to follow. The main and secondary points were clearly laid out. On the first point, I think that you are going a little too literal here on the term of what counts as being relevant. The idea that the process of determining who gets tenure is unrelated to the outcome of tenure seems to be splitting a hair here without any justification. If tenure is determined prematurely and the people who are granted it are underprepared as instructors, then the fault here is in the tenure process, and that is in fact part of the advocate's argument. The idea that it only applies because people have been there for a long time, I think that's a reasonable inference to make, but I think it's ignoring that this is really the process that is going on here, not just the end outcome that's going on. The argument that says that getting rid of people is expensive and time-consuming, you mostly concede that, but you don't tell us whether or not anybody needs to be gotten rid of. Did the advocate provide any information to suggest that people should be fired, that there is a lack of dismissal for a lack of qualifications or failure to meet standards or to follow the curriculum or any other sorts of behaviors? To me, that seems like the missing point, not the notion that there's a lack of motivation or that the cost issue is relevant, but whether or not there is a problem here. And I think you've got the right point there that says that there's really just a lack of evidence on this point to demonstrate causality between tenure and poor performance on the job. I think on the third point, you mostly kind of agree with the concept that the advocate has here, except it seems strange to me that you would do so, because I think if teachers, for instance, are protected by tenure and that improves their teaching, which there is an affirmative defense for, that would be a much stronger argument than just agreeing with the advocate's point there and arguing that it's not really sufficient in this particular situation. The idea that, there are plenty of examples of teachers who address issues from a controversial point of view or are concerned about deviating from, like a curriculum objective that is politicized, handed down by a local school board because they don't see it as being academically valid, but they can't, if they don't have tenure, they can't say anything about that sort of thing. I think that's the idea that really justified this in the first place. Now, it may be an antiquated process, but I think there are lots of cases where you can see these sorts of things still come up. I had an argument the other night in my other class about, intelligent design. All right, as an example of this sort of thing, whether or not intelligent design is in fact scientific in nature. And if the school board requires that you teach science and somebody wants to introduce this as a concept, that might be controversial. They might hesitate to do that. So I think that you needed to find some evidence to make an affirmative argument in a couple of places. You're just kind of relying on trying to deny the adequacy of the advocate's claim without providing any grounds of your own to suggest that there's reason to believe the opposite is true. I did like the summary, though. I thought that was pretty effective, kind of going through those processes and reminding us, here's the point I was trying to make, and that's why you ought to reject the advocate's position. That's exactly the way you ought to finish off. All right, thank you. Paul, were we putting you on the bottom of the list? Is that what was going on?
I think I can do it.
You think you can do it?
I can do it. I just
Okay.
don't know how about.
Okay.